Good evening, I'm Ed Gordon. Tonight we talk with two men who helped write one of the biggest pages in black musical history. Earl Van Dyke and Thomas Beans Bowles have been called two of the men most responsible for the success of Motown Records. We'll talk with these gentlemen about the glory days of Motown, and it's about Diana Ross, Berry Gordy, Marvin Gaye, or any other favorite Motown memory. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being here tonight. And I saw both of you laughing when we talked about the success of Motown Records. And certainly we all know the part that Berry Gordy played in building it, but there were the foot soldiers, if you will, and certainly you two are one of them, the cornerstones, if you will. Mr. Van Dyke, you were called the architect of the Motown Sound by many. You and what you called the Funk Brothers made the sound that so many people loved and enjoyed.
That's correct. That is really.
What kind of feeling do you get from that?
Well, I never thought that when we were doing the records that it would be, here we are 20 years later, and it sounds better to me now than it ever did before. And especially when we were in the studio recording. You know, we had no idea.
You said, a quote from you in Where Did Our Love Go, which was a book written by Nelson George last year, in the early days we were a family. It really was a feeling of family back then, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, because we were very, very close. Well, we didn't have but 2 buildings, I think it was, right? 1 building. I'm sorry. 1 building. And so, and then we branched out to 2. But we used to do things like, on the weekend, we would go to maybe to Barry's secretary's house and stay there all weekend, and we would maybe play poker, quarter limit. I mean, it's very, very close, you know, and we...
One other thing, and then we'll get some of Mr. Bowles' memories. When you looked around at that time and saw a Smokey Robinson, a Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Temptations, did you know, I mean, really, did you know that you had something special there?
Well, coming from the point of working in the studio, we really didn't come in contact with them that much. We come in contact more with Stevie and Marvin because they were musicians. But like, the only time we see Smokey and the rest of them, like, well, Smokey was a producer, but the other artists, we never saw them because, like, we would make the tracks and then they would come in and dub after we leave.
Now, Mr. Bowles, you had an interesting setup with Motown Records. You signed on as an artist in '62, a saxophonist, but then you became road manager for one of the most certainly memorable things that Motown has left us, the Motown Revue. You were the babysitter, if you will, of all these people. What was that like?
Well, I was the creator of Motown Revue. It was first called the Motown Special. That was my assignment when I first went to Motown, was to try to pull something together. They had a few shows, but they weren't going like Berry had a feel for. So he hired me because I'd been involved at the shows with the Flame Show Bar for so long. And I had quite a bit of experience in pulling the show together. So I spent 6 months developing first the Motown Special. And unfortunately, I got hurt on the tour, and it ended up being the Motown Revue. The idea was to have the Motown Special, the Gospel Train, a Jazz Liner, and out of each one of these you pull the top acts and put together a Motown Revue and make a variety show out of it. That was the real plan. It never got any farther than the Motown Revue.
But you had so many people on that thing, a lot of egos, I'm sure.
Not at that stage. Not at that stage. But first of all, to reflect back on what Earl said, it wasn't just the artist that was a family. The whole operation was a family. We had a rapport that no other organization I've ever been associated with has ever had. That includes fraternalism. This thing was so tight. I mean, nobody couldn't even talk about another artist outside of Motown, you know, without having some real problems, because we loved everybody. Now, the first artist was Marv Johnson. And that's when I got my first problem. I was a road manager there. And as he developed, I came back home and went into the office because Ms. Edwards was glad of the work that I had on.
Let me see if I can get you to share some memories about some of the people who went on and subsequently became superstars. Marvin Gaye, you had a close relationship with Marvin Gaye, did you not?
Very close, very close. Marvin and I were Well, I guess he kind of respected me for being able to tell him a few things, and he was a young guy, you know, and he was confused. He was doing a lot of things, and he wasn't happy with everything that he was doing. He wasn't pleased with the money he was getting. He wasn't pleased. He wasn't pleased with his life. He had turmoil, and we couldn't pinpoint it at that time. We just said, "Oh, well, he'll be all right," you know. And we kept working because he took all his anguish out in music. And he did a lot of things. But see, he had a fear of the stage. Nobody never knew. He didn't like to perform. He would stay in the studio all the time, but he did not like to go out on the stage. And he definitely didn't like to dance.
True.
He wanted to be a balladeer. And that wasn't selling.
Let me ask you, Mr. Van Dyke, now you, and we mentioned the Funk Brothers, James Jamerson and Benny Benjamin, and you folk just laid down what became gospel at that time in the 60s. I mean, that was the sound. One of the things that I find interesting in doing the reading that I did, because I read a number of books last year on Motown, was that you all kind of saw yourself as the musicians at that time, and then there were the artists, like you were saying,
right,
you know, like the Supremes. I mean, there was a difference there in your minds, was there not?
True. That's the only thing I was just wrapped up into the music thing. Now, the funny thing was, at the time, Beans and I were working together with the Lloyd Price Orchestra, right? And I never will forget, the first act that I run into was Smokey Robinson and the Miracles. And they came out, you know, and I know we laughed at them. We really did, sincerely, you know. Because we laughed at the music, the way the music was written and everything. But by being professional musicians, what we did was we just took the music and rearranged it so it sounded right. Now, we had a 14-piece orchestra, and maybe they came out there with a 6-piece arrangement.
Okay. You laughed at, and let it be known, everybody laughed at the Supremes for a long time, when they were the Primettes and they couldn't buy a hit. What about the Supremes? Now, a lot of people want to know about Diana Ross and what she was like. And we had Mary Wilson on some months ago, and she came on and talked about her book and talked about Diana and Flo and everybody. What were they like?
Well, I didn't really come in contact with them until we started doing things like we went to Europe, right, because Kim Weston and my group, we pioneered Europe so the Motown Revue could come over. But other than that, as far as the Supremes, I guess Beans could tell you more about that than I could, because he was in management and he really come in closer contact with them.
Okay, I've heard about you musicians, though. Those were 3 pretty ladies. I bet you know more than you're telling. We'll go to phone lines right now. Hi, you're on DBJ. Go ahead. Hello? Hello?
How you doing? This is Bill Johnson. I wanted to ask the guys, whatever happened to some of the musicians like Charlie Gabriel and some of these guys that played, you know, like in the background of a lot of the tunes?
Okay.
Well, the last I heard, Charlie Gabriel is working with, is it the Preservation Band?
No, it's another band, but it's a trumpet player. And he's out of New Orleans, and he's traveling all in the Far East.
Right, because I received a card from Charlie, what was it? Just before they had the big earthquake. And
he left the day before it happened.
He was in Taipei.
Okay. And the 2 other main, if you will, Funk Brothers have passed away.
Eddie Brown. First of all, there was James Gittens. And in the early days, he did all of the vibe and organ work. He's on Stop in the Name of Love. A lot of people think I was playing organ, but it wasn't. I was the piano player. And then he passed away, and John Griffin took his place. And then next was Benny Benjamin. Then we lost James Jamerson, and then Eddie Bongo Brown.
Okay. Back to the phone lines now. More questions at home. Hi, you're on DBJ. Go ahead.
Hello. I'd like to ask the 2 guests, what were their relationships with the writing team of Holland-Dozier-Holland, and if they have any, scenarios that went on back then, and how do they feel about Diana Ross leaving Motown?
Okay. Want to tackle that one?
Sure. Holland-Dozier-Holland were actually a vocal group. One of them were. They were singing with several other people, And they drove to Atlanta for a show a couple times with the Temptations and did other things like that. But Eddie Holland was another one that did not like the stage. He had a hit record, and he couldn't draw any money from it because he had almost had a heart attack every time he'd go on the stage. And he was like a robot when he got out there because he had to memorize everything he did. Great words and had a good voice, but he couldn't make it like that. So he went into the background. We had great rapport with Holland-Dozier-Holland because they were also musicians, and they drew on musicians for some of the ideas that they got. Everybody did. Now, Diana Ross, what did he ask me about Diana Ross?
Well, he wanted to know about Diana Ross leaving.
Diana Ross leaving Motown, I have personal opinions about it that I don't think I would like
we
to
won't
say.
tell her.
No, I don't think she had any problems leaving. I think she might have been glad to go, and I think everybody probably wanted her to go because she had gotten to the point where she was hard to not deal with, but sell as a Motown artist. They wanted to do bigger and better things for her. And I think it was a business move, truthfully. That's my thing.
And then with Holland-Dozier-Holland, I probably come in contact with them more than Beans did because they were in the studio quite a bit. And they had a heck of a team because now, like, Eddie Holland did all the lyrics. Lamont Dozier did a lot of the horn work. And really, Brian was the one that would come in the studio to work with the studio musicians.
The producing of the
Right.
He run the board, too.
Right.
Let me ask you about this. Berry Gordy. Hear a lot about the man who built Motown, being tight-fisted, iron fist, clamping down on everybody. What's your memory of Berry Gordy?
Well, my personal memory of Berry was very, very good to me. You know. Now, a lot of people felt like they were at Motown, they felt like they were mistreated. But Berry had a thing about the musicians. He didn't allow anyone to bother the Funk Brothers. Now, that was it. Now, as far as monies, whenever we wanted money, we had no problems. All we had to do was, it was like a pipeline we had through the Berry, and that was through his secretary. Whenever we wanted anything, we just went to see Rebecca.
And the thing is, and it's no secret that you guys made, musician-wise, maybe not the artists at that time, but musicians took home a good little chunk after a while with the other sessions.
The Funk Brothers took home a good little chunk. Not other musicians.
Not other musicians.
No.
Okay, the Funk Brothers. Let's see if we can go to the phones. I got a couple of questions for you, but I want to give people at home an opportunity. Hi, you're on DBJ. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Daryl. I was calling concerning about Marvin Gaye.
Okay.
Okay, his early years when he was starting off, he was in love with Tammy Terrell. I believe ever since Tammy Terrell died, he was going through changes. He went through changes.
Okay, what's your question?
I'd like to know, I believe that's the cause.
You think that's the turning point?
Yeah.
Okay, let's find out. Either one of you, gentlemen.
Well, there was love between Marvin and Tammy, but not an intimate love. You know, I do know this.
So a sisterly love.
Yes.
A sisterly type love. He loved her because she was a great artist.
Yes, she was.
And he really loved her for that, and she worked well with him. But, I mean, he had other love in his mind, but for, at that time, intimate love, that was some other person's.
I want to get to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, but before I do, I want to ask you something. Now, Mr. Van Dyke, you said in one of the books that Valerie Simpson was one of the most talented people at Motown, bar none.
Right.
But certainly she didn't reach the same heights at that time as other stars. There was a problem sometimes with favoritism and pushing the right people, was there not? And was that because there were just so many people?
Well, there were so many people until they had like a roster. And certain producers were assigned. Well, no, they weren't assigned. Everybody got a shot.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody got a shot at whatever artist, whose ever turn it was. You know,
Well, they liked to go with a winner. I remember certain instances that I had to pull some producers aside and say, look here, here's a good group. Work with this group for a while. Let's see if we can get some work from them. That came from management. and I was working in management at that time. I said, here's some people that everybody's missing, so let's get something to work.
Well, who do you see as an unsung hero there at Motown?
Me.
Plain and simple.
That's very simple. I'm one of the few that came away from there without even a letter of credit.
And both of you all had some problems in terms of wanting to record. You have a love for jazz. You both have a love for jazz.
Let me tell you, this is a point I want to make. Motown, like all other corporations, put you where they think you can do the most good, and they don't want you to cross those lines.
Right.
If I had very bad time getting out of my office, going down and playing in the studio, because they didn't want me being in the studio. Because if I got a hit record, I'm coming out of that. And they needed me in the office.
Right.
So they wanted you right there. I want to get to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, then we'll come back to close the show on more Motown memories. You're in a hit right now. I mean, we're talking about passage. You're in a hit right now at the Attic Theater. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the play?
Well, the play, as far as I can see, is based around the musicians, actually, the 4 musicians. Maybe Beans can explain it a little better than I can.
Well, it's based on the 4 musicians, and it's a recording studio where Ma Rainey did her recordings, and
she was a famous blues singer for people who might not know.
Right. She was the one that taught Bessie Smith. They might be more familiar with Bessie Smith, but she was the forerunner of Bessie Smith, and she was in a studio. I think it's supposedly Paramount, but at that time the racism was kind of tough, and she was a strong lady that didn't stand for no BS. She went straight out.
You are playing the standing room crowds only. We've got a little clip. While we continue to talk about it, let's take a look at that if we can. And let me ask you, this is your first true crack at actually acting.
Yeah.
That was frightening for you, I'm sure.
Let me tell you, on the preview, we walked around on that stage a long time before we got to the script. We was trying to remember it. And everybody was soaking wet when they got through. It was kind of tough.
It was tough.
Does it bring back not only memories, certainly of the 20s and people, for jazz lovers, that kind of music, but while you're sitting there in the studio, does it bring back those Motown memories of sitting in the studio and jamming and things of that nature?
Well, I predate Motown a little bit, so it brings back a few more ideas to me.
Same thing here.
See, I was playing music before Motown, and in fact, my sister had a rooming house for musicians in Indiana where I was born. And I met all the musicians that came through the town because they couldn't stay in the white hotels. So I got a chance to grow up in that atmosphere, and I got a chance to see all the beautiful people.
Okay. Let me get back to the phone lines real quick and give some folks at home a chance. Hi, you're on DBJ. Go ahead.
Yes. I saw Ma Rainey's Black Bottom Sunday before last, and what bothered me, I love jazz and all the black music and all that, but they did more arguing among themselves and using profanity that was just beyond the human imagination. And what I cannot understand is in 1987, why would a play like that come out during Martin Luther King's birthday celebration time that was so negative and so it was just...
Okay, let's give them a chance to answer this. And to be fair, they didn't write the play; they're performing in it. But as best you can answer that kind of thing. Either one of you.
I remember speaking to this lady on Sunday in the matinee, and she's got a valid point, but she's shorting her history. She wanted me to say, well, why didn't history start with Martin Luther King? We've got our history. We got to do our history as it is. And prior to, if she's ever been backstage, she'll hear that kind of audience. If she goes down on Woodward Avenue or down on Michigan Avenue, she's going to hear the same thing. If she's involved in the high schools, she's going to hear the same thing that we're talking. And she's going to also see the stabbing and the fighting and everything else, and she's got to face the realities of the life that we live. This is where we get some of our soulful thing. She can go all the way back to Africa and find the same things. In fact, the show of Ma Rainey does explicitly talk about some of the African heritage and and correlate some of the things. You cannot stop with the use of the language when it's an everyday occurrence in all of our lives.
Okay. Let me ask you something else. Or should I go to the phones one time before I ask it? They say give or take. Let's give some folks at home a chance. Hi, you're on DBJ. Go ahead.
Yes, my name is Patricia Smith, and I was wondering why is Gary Moore is selling Motown?
Why is
Barry
Gordy selling Motown?
Yes.
Any of you gentlemen talked to Barry recently?
No, but in the back of my mind, I don't feel Barry selling Motown.
Mm-hmm. Well, now there certainly have been, reports.
True. Well, but they said they would let you know within 2 weeks, a month ago, right? Mm-hmm. We haven't heard anything, have we?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say this, that every offer that I've heard him having always wanted Joe Bett, and if he sells Joe Bett, he's not smart as I thought he was.
That's a record company.
That's the publishing
company. I'm sorry.
See, everybody wants
Stevie
the publishing company. That's got everybody from Motown in
everybody.
And Smokey alone has 100 hits, not all the songs he's written. I mean 100 hits. And so why would he sell that when he'll be his great-grandchildren?
What about Stevie? And then you have to think about people like Shorty Long. Yeah. And there's so many people that have hits in there.
That still are being played.
That's right.
Okay.
And I don't think he's going to sell it. I think he needed some publicity, so he made that deal.
Okay. Quickly, one more phone call, or a couple more if we can get them in. Hi, you're on GBJ. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to know the reason for Florence Ballock leaving the Supremes or being put out of the Supremes.
Okay. Well, you were in management.
Well, who knows? All I can say is that in every family there's always disagreement. And when you have disagreement, sometimes you have to go away and think about it. And sometimes you say things you're sorry for. And sometimes you say, well, I don't need this. I'm going to go on out and do such and such a thing. And somebody said, well, you should go on out there. And then you say, well, I got to go ahead. So, I mean, it happens in the best of families. Mm-hmm. I think Benson Ford was having a little trouble with Henry Ford, wasn't it? So all I'm saying is that it was an unfortunate situation, and I think they all love each other yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me ask you something, Mr. Van Dyke. The music you hear today, what is called rhythm and blues, you have so many artists who are homogenizing their sound, if you will, trying to cross over. Is that a mistake?
To ask me something like that, I work in the public school system, and I find out that the musicians that are coming along now, they don't have the correct foundation. This is as far as I'm concerned. And I am really a jazz fanatic. But before I learn how to play jazz, I had to learn the classics and different things. And the youth today, they don't go into that, So I would rather not even comment on that.
Well, I don't mind commenting on it. I think, first of all, that the musicians today, very few of them think in terms of the artistic and cultural aspects of the music. They go for the dollar. And the dollars are few. It's just like playing basketball. Maybe you make it, maybe you won't. If you stub your toe, you can't jump off the ground. So, your career is over. In music, you got to play. You must play if you love music. If you're acting, you got to act. You got to speak. You got to write. Whatever it is. And you don't care if you get any money. You would like to make a living on it. If you can make a living on it, then you feel like you've done wonders. But the artistic quality has been removed from making and replaced with making money. And that's not the criteria to be an artist. You have to be happy or you would be sad. And either one of those are important ingredients in an artistic endeavor.
Let me ask you something. Who was your favorite Motown artist?
That's kind of hard to say. My favorite has always been like the Four Tops, always. I guess it's because like in age we were close together. And then, Stevie's always been my secret love because I remember one day we come into the studio and they said that Mr. Bowles would like to see us. So we had to go over to management and we wanted to find out what did Mr. Bowles want. He wanted the four Funk Brothers, which was Robert White, James Jamerson, William Benjamin, and myself. So when we go over there, he had a meeting with us. He said, I want you guys to teach Stevie how to play each one of the instruments. So I would have to say Stevie was more of my love, because like we take him in the studio and we taught him everything that we could possibly teach him.
And
and
certainly made you proud there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
What about you? Who's your favorite?
That's hard to say. I like so many of them. I like to look at them and see them do something. I mean, I didn't get a lot of money at Motown, but I sure got a lot of joy. I was one of the guys that said, hey, when the guys come to me and say, what they want me to sign up here, I said, hey, this is the first place that you're going to get a chance to do everything you need to do. Go in there and do something with it. Musicians, otherwise, I mean, like Pepper and all guys, the jazz guys came to me. I said, this is a young company with a young man at the beginning that's got a lot of foresight. Go and jump in there and do something. Well, I'm the old man, you know, at that time. So when they went in there and started producing, and they get into problems, they come holler at me. And I say, hey, just hang with it. Just go on and make it. And they made money, and I'm just as proud as if I was making the money.
We were the only ones that should I say that, Barry held back.
Okay.
No, he wouldn't let them go on the road. He wouldn't let them do other things. He didn't even want to make their own records.
It was a $1,000 fine at that time if we were caught recording with anybody else.
I thank you so much for joining us, and we greatly appreciate it, both of you. We close tonight with classic Motown. This is the Tempting Temptations, backed by Earl Van Dyke and others, and the way you do the things you do. Talk to you next Monday. Good night.
You gotta smile so